I'm really very honored to be with you today, and I'm here representing the president of the International Organization of Employers, Daniel Funes de Rioja, who sends his warmest regards and his regrets. Daniel's loss is my gain, though, as I'm not only enjoying Asso Lavoro and Ciett's generous hospitality in this beautiful city, in this beautiful room, but I've also had the benefit of sitting in on the meetings, both yesterday afternoon and today, and learning a lot from this very substantive conference. And it's also a great pleasure for me to see so many friends and colleagues here. Preparing for my remarks this afternoon has given me a chance to reflect on my own experience in working with Ciett and its members on both global and national public policy issues, both through the IOE and elsewhere, experience that I hope will illuminate the subject I've been asked to speak about, which is how can the employment and recruitment industry work better with employer organizations to influence policymakers. So let me take just a moment to describe my personal experience in the hope that it's going to give you a sense of my own perspective on this subject. I've spent more than 25 years heading the policy department of an employer organization. That's the United States Council for International Business, which is headquartered in New York City. USCIB has a membership of some 300 global companies, professional firms, and industry associations across all sectors of the economy. USC promotes an open system of world trade, finance, and investment. Policies we and our members, and I hope everybody in this room, believes contribute to economic growth and human welfare. As the American affiliate of the IOE, but also the Business and Industry Advisory Committee to the OECD and the International Chamber of Commerce, my organization is the voice of US business at the multilateral level. So at the ILO, at the OECD, and in a variety of United Nations bodies and agencies. USCIB works on a broad range of policy issues, but for more than 10 years, I personally have developed a special concentration on labor and employment issues. I chair the BEAC Employment, Labor, and Social Affairs Committee, and serve as the US employer on the governing body of the ILO. I also serve as a vice president of IOE, which of course is how I managed to snag this wonderful invitation today. And the IOE, as I hope you all know, is the world's largest and most representative business association, with a membership of more than 150 employer organizations from over 140 countries. It's the IOE that, among other things, organizes and facilitates employer participation in the ILO. So in these capacities, I've had a lot of opportunity to engage with companies and sectoral associations across a wide range of industries and to participate in employment policy debates taking place at the national, regional, and multilateral levels, within and among our employer bodies, between employers and workers, with national governments, and in multilateral bodies and institutions. I've worked alongside and benefited from the wisdom of many of you in this room. You are what in my office we call good citizens. To us, that means, well, first of all, it means paying your dues. That's the first requirement of being a good citizen of an employer organization. But it means more than that. It means providing data and analysis that can only come from experts and practitioners on the ground. Data that helps employer organizations make credible and convincing arguments. It means providing sweat equity, or what we call sweat equity, whether by showing up in person when we have an opportunity to sit at the policymakers' table, or by willingness to sit to review documents, make substantive comments on our drafts, and help us develop our policy advocacy tools. And it means engaging in the kind of responsible and public-spirited initiatives and actions that demonstrate and embody your values as an industry and support those of the wider business community. I'm going to highlight a few examples in a few minutes of such initiatives. The employment services industry has an important story to tell. My job in addressing you today is to explain why your citizenship is crucial to the challenges facing not only your industry, but the business community at large. Obviously, a virtuous circle is at work here. By helping us to articulate your positions, experiences, and concerns in ways that can be integrated into the positions that serve the broader business community, which of course, by the way, consists importantly of your own clients and customers. You strengthen the credibility and ability of employment organizations and therefore your own industry to influence policymakers. You are positioned on the front lines of the world of work as leading labor market experts and as important enablers of the new economy. During our own lifetimes, the context in which work is organized, distributed, and performed has changed irrevocably. We heard something of that this morning. Even the ILO, not an organization known for its appetite for upsetting the status quo, has begun to talk about the future of work. In his report to the International Labor Conference that will begin in Geneva next week, the ILO Director General Guy Ryder notes that change is taking place at such a speed and at such a scale as to constitute a transformation of the world of work. For example, he says, and I quote him, "The prospect of a single job for a working life has become outdated in today's world of work." We all know that, but to have the Director General of the ILO say that is quite something. The forces propelling this future include globalization, technological advances, migration patterns, and the demographic trends that are transforming economies, industries, companies, and jobs. These forces are creating enormous new opportunities, but they threaten vested interests, demand new skills, and challenge those less willing or less able to adapt. And they are being accelerated exponentially by the internet and the rise of social media, which is behind me, right? Which have engendered an explosion in the quantity and speed by which information and know-how can be obtained and shared. Information and communications technologies are also fostering unprecedented transparency. We've had transformative revolutions before. To again quote Guy Ryder, "The debate about the disruptive effects of technological changes on jobs is some 2 centuries old. And the encouraging conclusion," this is Guy Ryder, "the encouraging conclusion to be drawn from the historical record is that over the long term, it has created more employment than it has destroyed and has pushed overall living standards to new levels." The question, though, that none of us can answer is whether the current disruption, a technological revolution that promises further applications in such areas as big data, 3D printing, and robotics, to name just a few examples, whether this revolution is inherently different from those that we've experienced in the past, and what should we do about it? History tells us that we can't stop progress, and history hasn't been kind to those who try. To be called a Luddite is not a compliment. But progress can and must be shaped. The ILO seems to get this, or at least Guy Ryder does. He says in his ILC report that, quote, "Any attempt to resist innovation should not so much be considered misguided or self-defeating as simply impossible. There can be no credible way to do so." We need to help him and his colleagues and our governments around the world help shape the fruits of change and innovation. The IOE is taking up this challenge, and we need the help of Ciett to do so. Clearly, we're not starting from a completely blank slate here. For example, when the IOE demands that the ILO take a braver approach to addressing the future, we do not do so with the intention of questioning certain verities, like fundamental principles and rights at work. Rather, we want to ensure that these rights and standards and principles are meaningful and remain meaningful in new work environments. I'm going to give you 3 examples of baskets of issues central to the changing world of work. Issues that I know are of primary concern to you, that pose both regulatory and perceptual challenges to your businesses, to your image, and that lend themselves to your engagement with employer organizations at the national and international level. Engagement that can help influence policymakers and bolster the positive reputation of your industry. So my first basket I call flexible forms of work. We've talked about this already today. Many people call these non-standard forms of work. In some quarters, not least within trade unions, standard employment, that means employment through an open-ended contract that is both permanent and full-time, is considered the ideal working arrangement. Jobs that deviate from that standard sometimes are demonized by unions. They're called precarious or low quality, to quote the OECD. But flexible work arrangements, as you know far better than I, are not automatically unstable. A worker's perception of job security depends both on the terms of his or her service and the conditions in the wider labor market, such as unemployment rates and efficient labor market policies. Workers who know they have choices, that is, that they can change their job, will feel more secure than those in economies with high unemployment or large informal sectors, even if in the latter situation they are heavily protected. In short, stability at the workplace no longer means simply having a permanent contract. Similarly, we all know that not all non-standard jobs are low-quality jobs. Demonizing them, either overtly or by implication, ignores the ways in which they can benefit both workers and employers. Well-designed and regulated non-standard forms of employment can both protect workers and help enterprises by increasing their ability to respond and adapt to market demands. They can also be a mechanism for retaining and recruiting workers, as well as for more quickly harnessing skills and expertise. In addition, freely chosen employment in flexible arrangements permits better reconciliation of work, life, and family responsibilities. Non-standard jobs can act as stepping stones to standard employment. But the next better employment opportunity could also be a move from one temporary contract to another. In short, seen through the lens of today's economic realities, permanent full-time work is no longer, if it ever was, the default best case. We should neither try to recreate the past nor engage in counterproductive attempts to hamper the future. Looking to that future, we should respond to the new and changing demands of the labor market by employing various complementary employment strategies. Different and flexible work arrangements attempt to better respond to these changes, and at the very least, are a better alternative than informal forms of employment or long spells of unemployment. Now, I know I'm preaching to the converted here, so I'll stop. But your role in helping arm employer advocates with data and argumentation and good practices has been decisive as employer organizations take on these issues. So let me provide you just a couple of examples of successful joint collaboration between employment organizations and your sector. With the help of Ciett, both BIAC at the OECD and the IOE have recently had opportunities to argue the very case I just made to you. In April, BEAC held a consultation with the OECD Employment Committee on the forthcoming update of the OECD Employment Outlook, which is a very influential publication. That outlook now features a prominent theme on job quality, and you heard from Stefano Scarpetta on that this morning. Our aim was to ensure that the OECD brings sufficient rigor and definition to the concept of job quality, and that non-standard work is not automatically, implicitly, or explicitly deemed to be low quality. We will have further opportunities to engage both governments and the OECD Secretariat in the run-up to the January 2016 Employment Ministerial, which will set the agenda for future OECD work in this area. Similarly, Ciett has been instrumental in helping IOE participate very effectively in ILO sectoral and expert meetings that address various aspects of workplace flexibility. In February, for example, the IOE fielded a delegation to an ILO tripartite meeting of experts on non-standard forms of work. The conclusions of that meeting, which will influence further activity in the OECD, were largely supportive of the positions that I've just outlined. These included a call on the ILO to, quote, improve the understanding of the evolution of different flexible forms of employment, development of new technologies and models of production, transport and public services, including through historical analysis. This means, in short, that the debate on flexible forms of work will be widened to tackle the more ambitious task of anticipating and preparing for new realities. At the national level, too, the recruitment industry, working with and through your employer organizations, has been effective in proposing constructive regulatory approaches and means to improve the existing legal and institutional framework. For example, I know this is going on in Spain, where the recruitment industry is playing a role in discussions on future labor reforms and labor contract models. My second basket is something that many of you participated in a discussion of yesterday, but not everybody, and that's forced labor. And the issue of the recruitment industry's relationship to forced labor. According to the ILO, just to remind you of some statistics that we heard yesterday, an estimated 105 million people in the world now work in a place outside their country of birth. Of those, 21 million people are victims of forced labor. Thus, the potential for recruitment-related exploitation and abuse is significant, and it is rising. The recruiters in question who are implicated here are unregulated, and they skim billions of dollars from unwitting migrants. They are not in this room, but their actions potentially damage the reputation and credibility of every member of Ciett. Reducing abusive practices in the recruitment process is therefore necessary, not just to protect migrant workers and domestic labor markets, but to ensure well-functioning immigration systems. The absence of fair and transparent recruitment creates serious problems for employers who often have no way of knowing what kind of practices are taking place in far-off countries, or what abuses workers have been subjected to or promised by unscrupulous intermediaries. In short, we're dealing not only with a human rights issue, which would be serious enough in itself, don't mistake me, but we're dealing with also a business issue. The reputation of the entire employment services industry can be seriously damaged by allegations of exploitation and abuse of workers. Ciett, of course, has long recognized this problem and has adopted a robust code of conduct to address it. You just beefed it up yesterday. The Ciett Code, which applies to all its members, is a powerful framework for responsible placement services thus simultaneously addressing a problem and bolstering the legitimacy of your industry in dealing with it, and also contributing to the policy debates surrounding it. By requiring members to make a public commitment to respect worker rights, safety at work, standards for ethical and professional conduct, et cetera, including respect for the principle that provision of services should be free of charge to job seekers themselves, Ciett has taken an important step to counteract abusive and fraudulent practices during the recruitment and placement process. Both ILO, through its Fair Migration Initiative, and the International Organization on Migration, which is called the IOM, through its Public-Private Alliance for Fair and Ethical Recruitment, are working in this space. Both recognize that the development of innovative approaches and practical tools will require broad collaboration between governments and business. The IOE has signed an agreement with the IOM to work on a global level on reducing exploitative recruitment practices, notably through supporting IOM's International Recruitment Integrity System, IRIS, which Federico Soda talked to you about yesterday. This is a voluntary accreditation system for recruitment intermediaries so that they can demonstrate their commitment to fair and ethical practices. And not only is Ciett supportive of the ILO and IOM initiative, its code is a central reference point for both organizations. Working with and through IOE in these venues is therefore both an opportunity to continue doing good and, as importantly, to the reputation of your industry in a way to be seen to be doing good. My third basket consists of youth employment, skills development, and workplace diversity. Now, that may seem like a bit of a miscellaneous catch-all, but I think these topics are interconnected, and they're all central to your concerns. They all speak to the pressing need to find, train, and deploy appropriately skilled, productive, adaptive, work-ready labor force. They lie at the heart also of two IOE practical initiatives that are well suited to the interests and concerns of the employment services industry. We all know that there is a youth employment crisis taking place in many countries and regions. And I'm sure you're equally aware of the strong business case for actively addressing this problem. Obviously, as parents and grandparents and as citizens, we have an interest here. But beyond that, young people are our potential workforce, and they're the next generation of taxpayers, consumers, innovators, and investors. So there's a compelling business case for addressing youth employment. It's imperative that we ensure that employment opportunities are available to young people and that they are equipped with the relevant skills. Business is at the forefront of a growing recognition that employability and lifelong learning are at the heart of a range of key global economic and employment challenges. And both ILO and OECD are heavily engaged in this cause, as are our international organizations, IOE and BEAC. We recognize that increasing the employment capacities of job seekers through effective education and training policies and programs is critical to maintaining labor market engagement across economic cycles and maintaining people in work across their working lives. Apprenticeships and training programs can be key tools in this regard. And that's why in late 2013, the IOE and BEAC decided to put our money where our mouth was, or our rhetoric into practice, and to make a concerted practical effort to increase training opportunities for young people. Working with the support of a number of national employer organizations, including my own, and companies, including some in this room, the ILO and together with the ILO and OECD, we established the GAN, the global, global apprenticeship network. Bettina is waving at me because she's very involved in the GAN. GAN is a public-private partnership, a coalition of committed companies, federations, and international organizations dedicated to promoting quality apprenticeships. The goal is to create jobs for youth and skills for business. GAN's membership is global and multi-sectoral, and it's done already a number of things like develop toolkits, conduct surveys, and produce materials that can be used to advocate for effective institutions and public sector policies that support the creation of apprenticeships and other training vehicles. GAN provides visibility and recognition for companies committed to creating work readiness opportunities for young people, and it facilitates exchange and diffusion of best practices and knowledge of work-based training. So this is my commercial and my invitation to you to talk to Bettina or me, or go to the website and look up ways in which you can participate in or join or benefit from the GAN. But young people are not the only underutilized pool of potential employees. Your clients are increasingly coming to embrace what you and your industry already know, that there's a strong business and economic case for seeking more diverse workplaces. The larger, more diverse, and more populous the universe of potential employees and customers, the better for business. So I'm going to talk about just one untapped talent pool, and it might be one that you haven't thought much about. It's not women, it's people with disabilities. In some countries, an incentive to employ the disabled has been spurred by legal requirements, such as quotas. But the business case for hiring people with disabilities goes further than that. People with disabilities have proven to be productive, reliable employees. They're also a market. Some companies develop products and services for people with disabilities, their families, and friends, which together makes quite a large universe. Perhaps above all, though, people with disabilities are a very underutilized pool of talent. I know that Ciett has done some useful research demonstrating how agency work can help increase labor market participation and integrate vulnerable groups, such as the disabled. For example, temporary agencies can play a crucial role vis-a-vis user companies to the extent that they can screen and vouch for the capabilities of potential employees. Let me give you just one example. We hear a great deal about the shortage of STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, and math skills in the workforce. Companies complain in particular about their difficulty in finding qualified personnel for computer and data-driven jobs. Yet some companies have found a valuable untapped pool of talent among people with autism, people whose very condition well suits them to the tasks required. This is a population with an astronomically high unemployment rate and an equally astronomically good record as contributing employees once they're given a chance to work. Companies that recognize such opportunities, again, including some of the companies in this room, are joining the ILO Business and Disability Network. Bettina's raising her hand again. That's a public-private partnership that comprises a global network of employer organizations, multinational companies, other disability networks, and selected NGOs. Its purpose is to disseminate information and experiences from around the world, to provide a platform for companies to highlight and share their best practices, and to highlight and proliferate job and training opportunities for disabled people. And again, I hope that many of you will explore the possibility of working with the IOE on this project. Let me conclude with a few thoughts about a proactive advocacy agenda that Ciett and its members, working with and through IOE, BEAC, and your national employer organizations, might consider for the future. First, You can help the broader business community engage constructively in the debate over the changing world of work. This debate is complex and diverse, and it's just getting started. It will go on for years in multiple fora, including the ILO and the OECD, and in national governments. And as we've already discussed, it is in part about the rise of more flexible, short-term, and transient forms of work. But it's about much more than that. It's also about completely new forms of work. The Uber model is migrating from the transportation and hospitality sectors to other parts of the economy. 3D printing, crowdfunding, robotics are beginning to transform other industries. These transformations will impact an array of institutional and legal frameworks, including Social Security, taxation, trade, investment. They'll also have a profound impact on the employment relationship. We as employers need to provide credible input to policymakers and to trade unions on how we can work together to prepare for this impact. This is not only about companies and workers adapting to new technologies or accommodating the impact of social media. It's about transforming attitudes towards work. It's up to employers, and you as mediators in the labor market are key here, to provide the arguments, data, and examples that have the power to change entrenched mindsets in both public and private sectors, among workers and employers, unions and employer organizations alike. Ciett is already quite advanced, much more so than many other sectors, in thinking about these new realities, not just because they challenge your industry, but because the employment relationship and the shape of the labor market are at the core of your business. IOE will be depending on you to provide the good arguments, the key data, and the concrete examples that it can use to help change mindsets within our own ranks as well as outside them, and to the benefit of the broader business community of which you are such an integral part. Secondly, you can help us address the information deficit. Analysis of labor market trends is essential to anticipate and transform realities. The recruitment industry has been an invaluable source of information on employment trends, unemployment challenges, and skill deficits, especially in developed countries. But in too many parts of the world, we still lack both reliable statistics and qualitative information on existing skill shortages and private sector needs. We lack employment specialists with analytic capabilities. This information deficit is tremendously damaging to our efforts to affect employment and labor market policy in many parts of the world. It's, of course, not the role of the private sector, let alone the role of the recruitment or mediation sector, to assume the responsibilities of public authorities in collecting statistics. But we can help. One vehicle may be through public-private partnership models. Such arrangements are proliferating in the context of the post-2015 development agenda. It's just one example. Thirdly and finally, work with us to consolidate the legal mandate for your industry. Here's an idea of how IOE and its membership can most directly help you. In March of this year, Ciett and Uni Europa, the European social partners for your industry, issued a joint declaration that, among other things, recognizes that temporary agency work plays a useful role in the labor market. Sadly, this recognition is not universal. The fact that in so many countries, private employment agencies do not enjoy full legal recognition is an issue for all of us. ILO Convention 181, which recognizes the role of private mediation, has only 31 ratifications. I know Anne-Marie said this morning, yay, it has 31 ratifications. So depending on whether you're a half full or a half empty kind of person, this is either encouraging or not. There ought to be more. IOE fully understands how important it is to the entire business community to have properly framed, complementary private mediation agencies operating around the world, to the entire business community. It will remain a heavy lift in some places to overcome negative perceptions, fears, and prejudices. But some progress has been achieved as more countries are opening the way, and more will be achieved as Ciett and its members continue to demonstrate their good citizenship. You can count on IOE to support you in these efforts. Thank you.